live from our studios in Brooklyn, New York. It's the Cool Jew Show, bringing you the cool Jews of the world. Brought to you by the best Jewish site for entertainment and news, www.thecooljew.com. I'm your host, Yosef Scheidler, aka Webmaster. Tonight is the 9th of Adar, Bays 5768, and March 16th, 2008. Today's show is sponsored by Sweet Expressions, located on Kingston Avenue. Purim is coming up. Do you have your shlach manos yet? For the best shlach manos in town, visit Sweet Expressions. Candy, chocolate, fruit trays, you name it, they have it. For all your Purim shlach manos needs, visit the Sweet Expressions located at 310 Kingston Avenue in Brooklyn, or give them a call at 718-613-0188, or call them toll free, 1-888-613-0188. Today's special guest is Rabbi Greenberg, who will be speaking about his experience as the only Orthodox rabbi in Alaska. And now, the Cool Jew Show. Welcome back to the studios of the Cool Jew. Ufaratzta Yama V'Kema Tzafona V'Negba, spread out to all corners of the world, north, east, south, and west. Following that directive, following that instructive, and on the line with us is Rabbi Greenberg, who is the Chabad Lubavitch representative in Alaska. Rabbi Greenberg, welcome onto the show.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Rabbi Greenberg. How is Alaska this evening?
Alaska is doing great. Finally, the snow is starting to melt, and we are beginning to see the outside life.
Let me ask you a simple question, and maybe we'll get more detailed into this. But it seems if we're gonna talk about Jewish life in Alaska, it seems that's like a paradox. It seems that can't really go together. Is it possible to be Jewish in Alaska?
Absolutely. Not only possible, it's something that if you can be a Jew in Alaska, you can't really be a Jew in New York. Because as the Talmud says, Sadna de Are Chado, the earth is everywhere the same. And for the same reason, you could be a Jew in New York, you could be a Jew in Alaska. And therefore, there are Jews in Alaska, and this is a testimony that there could be a Jew anywhere you want.
So,
but to your surprise, the story of Alaska Jewry is much richer and older and more interesting than you think of, and that's why we are building now a Jewish Historical Museum of Alaska's Jewry. It's a story that goes more than 160 years.
So maybe you can start out by telling us a little bit about the Alaskan Jewish history and yourself and how you came to be in a position to be the rabbi in Alaska.
Well, it's really interesting, and like I said, our whole museum is going to be built on that story, but on a one-foot synopsis, the actual purchase of Alaska from Russia to America was invented by Jews. The whole idea, there were a group of Jewish fur traders in San Francisco who used to do business with Alaska when Alaska was still the Russian Alaska, and they were looking for opportunities to receive a license from the Russian company.
How far back are we going right now, what you're talking about?
We're talking about 160 years ago, around that time when Alaska was actually bought from Russia and by United States. And basically, I'll tell you exactly the year, can't remember at the moment, but when Alaska was bought from Russia, as I said, those Jewish fur traders were actually trying to receive a license that they could do business with Alaska, and only they could do business. And in their lobbying in Washington and going back to the Russian company, they actually heard they got important information that the Russians not only are willing to give them a license to do business in Alaska, but they're actually interested for a few dollars to sell the whole thing away. It actually happened in 1860. That's when Alaska was bought from Russia. 1867. Russia sold Alaska to America. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Anyway, is those Jewish fur traders, the headquarters was in San Francisco, they invented their ideas. They went to Senator Cohen from San Francisco, who was actually a classmate of Secretary of State William Seward, which is the famous William Seward who actually did the purchase of Alaska from Russia. But the whole idea, the invention, it was a Jewish one. And not only did they invent it and they nourished the entire process, but after Alaska was actually finally bought from Russia, this group of Jews, Louis Gerstel and Louis Schloss and all the group of Jews, they actually became the de facto governors of Alaska because they got the monopoly from the United States to do business in Alaska, and in return they had to establish civilization, American civilization, so to speak, in Alaska, community centers and post trades and so on and on. And basically, it's Alaska's story, and not only that, even later on in the gold rush, when people started to float to go to Alaska for finding gold, really the major flow of immigrants to Alaska came because of this ACC, the Alaska Commercial Company, again owned by the Jews in San Francisco, who actually provided steamboats and so on to take all those Jews and non-Jews, all those people who went to Alaska. And you won't believe it that even in Nome, Alaska, in 1900, there were over 200 Jews, and they established a synagogue. And actually, the first store that came to Alaska was in 1900, and it came from a Rabbi Bailiff in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, who was originally from Lithuania, and he was a Rav in Yerushalayim, an Orthodox rabbi, and he is the one that had two sons. His own two sons were in Alaska, and they brought the first Torah to Nome, Alaska, and this Torah is still here in Anchorage today.
So you're telling me in 1900 there was a synagogue in Alaska with religious
There was a synagogue, and not only that, it's funny, the newspaper from Nome, Alaska, it says in the newspaper, it says that they are forming a synagogue because holidays is coming up and so on. And then the article says the services will be strictly Orthodox. Because they were children, those two Jews who brought Judaism to Alaska, they were children of Rabbi Ephraim Heschel Bailiff, who was a rabbi in the Amsterdam congregation of Yerushalayim for 28 years. And his two sons was one in Nome, and then the second, and one stayed in the southeast Alaska, the other one came to Anchorage and was in Anchorage for many years.
So there was.
Here's a story. Go ahead.
Go ahead yourself.
The story of Alaskan Jews is very unique. The same thing in Fairbanks in 1909. There was a synagogue was established again by an Orthodox Jew. His name was Bob Bloom, and who spent a lifetime in Alaska, and he was one of the founders of Alaska University and so on. And again, he was an Orthodox Jew who started this synagogue, and also the Torah came also from Rabbi Bailiff. Another Torah came to Fairbanks.
Now, you have possession of that Torah that was there from that time?
No, it's not in our synagogue because it went to the Reform synagogue because they were here for many years before us.
So they have possession of that Torah.
Right.
Okay.
But anyway, but the real flow of Alaskan Jews began during World War II, when Alaska became a very important focal point of security for the United States. And four bases were established in Alaska, two in Anchorage, two in Fairbanks, and many, many soldiers came to Alaska. Among them, there was a great number of Jewish soldiers was served there for several years, and of course the Jewish
American
Wolf
soldiers, correct?
Huh?
American soldiers.
I can't hear you.
You're talking American soldiers here.
Yeah, American soldiers who came to Alaska to serve during the World War II, and Alaska became a very important point during the war, and therefore very critical location during the war. And therefore, what happened was that, of course, the army sent Jewish chaplains, and they were de facto the first rabbis who came to Alaska. And the Jewish community actually grew out of those military personnel who kind of, after serving for 4 or 5 years, some of them fell in love in Alaska and just came back here to live here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because of those big bases, there were chaplains coming here year after year, and they were rotated in Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and they were the ones who made the bar mitzvahs for both, for the civilian and for the military personnel. And little by little, the community started to grow. But there were always Jews in almost in every town and city, but the bigger cities and the bigger Jewish communities began to grow out of those military bases and so on. And then, I would say in 1959, after Alaska became a member of the Union and became a state, that's when a new migration of Jews started to flow to Alaska, as Alaska is a part of the United States now. People who were looking for opportunities and so on. But of course, the real big migration of Jewish people to Alaska began, the big migration of people to Alaska, Americans, began mainly when the oil started to flow from Alaska.
Mm-hmm. So presently, right now, how many Jews would you estimate, Kleinhor, are living in Alaska?
Probably about 6,000 Jews, but it's a very rough estimate, very general estimate.
Around 6,000 Jews, and where would you say the majority of these people are coming from?
Well, many of them come from North America, from like New York and Boston, but probably the greater majority come from the western states, like Seattle, California, and so on, Oregon, and so on, Washington, Oregon, California, those kind of states.
I've been told there's a lot of Israelis over there as well. Is that any truth to that?
When you say a lot, what does a lot mean? It's a lot enough for Alaska, but not a lot. I mean, maybe there are 30 or 40 Israelis, not more.
So there are Israeli families now living in Alaska?
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh-huh. Okay, so Rabbi, you have been there since when?
We came to Alaska in 1991 with the Rebbe's blessing, when the Rebbe said to us several times. Once he told us when we brought a delegation of our members to see the Rebbe. It was in the summer of '91, and the Rebbe said to us that he said to the delegation that Alaska gives a cold attention. It makes people think of coldness when they hear the word Alaska, and it's very far from here, he said. But yet the Rebbe said, when it comes to Yiddishkeit, don't use the coldness, but the opposite, the Rebbe said. To live in Alaska, you have to be extra warm. When you think of Yiddishkeit, you should think of that Alaska should encourage you not only not to be cold, but to use the extra warmth that you need to live in Alaska to do Judaism with the extra chayas and warmth, and to make sure you spread Judaism, especially in Alaska, because of its being far and being cold. That was one line the Rebbe said, that basically to use Alaska and to look on it on the positive way, that to live here, people need always to have heating in the homes and heating in the cars and heating everywhere you go and so on, is to use extra heat, extra warmth. And another time the Rebbe told us, that was the last time we saw the Rebbe before he had his stroke, it was in 1992, and the Rebbe said to us, with a big smile, he said, don't forget to make it warm there, to warm up Alaska. And actually we saw that after that, within the next 10 years, global warming, Alaska's really changed, and it's now warm. I guess there was a double meaning to this. Mm-hmm. But anyway...
so, Rabbi,
yeah.
Backtracking just for a second here, before you,
sure.
Number one, there was some type of semi-Chabad Shliach, Rabbi Heber, who's now the Shliach in the Golan Heights, was there, correct?
Well, actually, what Rabbi Heber, when he was in Alaska, he was not yet a Chabadnik.
Okay.
Although he was already in contact with Lubavitch. Rabbi Heber was a modern Orthodox young man who joined the U.S. Army, and he was Air Force, and he was a chaplain. And he was stationed in Alaska for 2 years, from 74 to 76, from 73 to 75. And during those 2 years, he built the famous Alaskan mikveh, the first mikveh, with the help of Rabbi Greenberg from Minnesota and Rabbi Handel Oliver Shalom from Montreal. And there was a very famous letter and blessing from the Rebbe to Alaska's Jew and to Rabbi Hebers for building that mikveh. But Chabad actually began its relationship with Alaska in 1970. The first two Lubavitch Bachim went from Ekashlichas was in 1970. They went to Alaska and they traveled to almost every town and every village. Huh?
Any idea who these two were?
Yeah, Shmuel Spritzer and Shmuel Langsam were the two young men at that time, two Bachim who went to Alaska. And after that, every year, there were Bachim going to Alaska for the summers. Then Rabbi Shalom Ber Levitin, when he went to Shlichus in 1972 to Seattle, his shlichus was to the entire Pacific Northwest, which including Alaska and Oregon and Vancouver and so on. And he started to travel to Alaska. And that's how, year after year, the relationship began between Alaska and Lubavitch, between Rabbi Levitin, between the Bachim who came, between Rabbi Heber who built a mikveh, with Rabbi Goslam and Rabbi Handel. And the relationship started to grow, and then with two families, the very famous family, the Green family, the two brothers, Jerry and Perry Green, the relationship began with Lubavitch. Little by little, year after year, they became closer to Yiddishkeit and closer to Lubavitch, and they started to support and be involved with Lubavitch work. And then later in 1980, Perry Green's son-in-law, David Grashin, moved to Alaska. He's also a modern Orthodox Jew who married his daughter, and he started, with Rabbi Heber's help, he started the synagogue, the little chavurah of Orthodox Jews, and they began services once a month and so on. And then, after 10 years, David Grashin moved back to Seattle because he wanted to raise his children with the Orthodox day school and so on. And that's when the need began, after they already established something, the need began to ask for a shliach, and that's when Rabbi Levitin started to look around for a shliach, and since I was in Seattle for 2 years in the yeshiva shliach of Rabbi Levitin, that's the relationship began.
Mm-hmm. So that's how you, because of your connection with Rabbi Levitin in Seattle, that's how you started getting involved.
That's how I basically, Rabbi Levitin recruited us. Me and my wife, we had many offers, but we wanted to go to a place where we could start from scratch, the real shlichus, to start from zero, and we felt Alaska is that kind of place.
So 1991 was the first year you stepped foot in Alaska?
Right. Well, we went in 1990 to see Alaska in the summer, and then we came back, we rode into the Rebbe, we got our blessing, and in 91 we were on our way to Alaska.
Okay, so you move out to Alaska in 1991. In Alaska, there's no kosher food. There's no mikvahs. There's no. I mean, maybe there is a mikvah. Maybe there was a mikvah then with the Rabbi Heber built.
No, we had to remodel the mikvah.
You had to remodel the mikvah. There's no kosher food. No Jewish education over there. What was it like the first few years getting going, and what have you established over there?
Well, that's where the Rebbe's education and the Rebbe's blessings and the Rebbe's inspiration comes into. Without the Rebbe, it would have been impossible. There is no question about it. No one else would not be able to survive. Only a shliach of the Rebbe would be able to survive it. It wasn't easy. There were years we didn't have a mikveh here. My wife had to fly to Seattle for 3.5 hours. And other members of the community had to fly even if something was broken or something had to be remodeled and so on. It was not easy. Only with the Rebbe's care that you could survive such a thing. And but with the Rebbe's care you could survive. And thank God today there are shluchim not only in Alaska but even in places which are further and harder than Alaska.
So maybe you can tell me.
If I have a cousin my cousin moved from Israel with 5 children to a city which is in Russia, which is called Birbidjan, which is probably one of the most remote cities in the world. And it's all the way near China, at the far east Russia. I mean, to go there is much harder than Alaska.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, Alaska in its own right is got to be a difficult place. Maybe you can tell us some stories about your first year in Alaska and how you got going and what life was like that first year.
Well, it was very, very unusual, of course. Between the natural, very unusual things. If it's the major snowstorms, the darkness during the day, in the mornings and the evening, early hours in the winter, between the huge moose that walk around the city.
Let me stop you 1 second. On that note, we had some viewers send in some questions over here, and we had several people ask very curiously. I mean, with the time schedule over there, it gets late. Sometimes it gets dark very late sometimes, and the schedule over there that it gets sometimes light and everything. How do you work that out with Shabbos and fast days? And I mean that's got to be very difficult. Is there a different ruling for that? How does that work over there with that?
Well, it's a very good question. It's an unusual place and unusual questions, and there are many answers. But interesting enough that this issue has been an issue in the Jewish world for many, many years, because in Europe there are cities who are similar to that, like Finland and other locations, and there were actually great sages like the Bala Tesves and the Tesves Yom Tov and other great sages who actually lived in such communities where it was very late, if not as late as Alaska, but pretty close. And they discussed it already. The issue is not really new, but it's unusual to most Jews, because most Jews don't live in those locations. Actually, the Rebbe mentioned that once, actually in the last Sukkot, before the talk in 1992, the Rebbe spoke about the different shilas that come up in the note, and the Rebbe mentioned those places, and the Rebbe said, B'ashgacha Pratis we see by divine providence that most Jews don't live in those places. But still there is enough amount of Jews who do live there, and therefore our sages need to have answers for that. But anyway, like what I'm trying to say is that this issue is not only in Alaska, it's also in Europe and also in Russia and Leningrad, in other places where there is this issue.
So
basically there are like 6 or 7 answers to this, but the halacha, the way we do is in those places where there is a sunset, which is most locations where there are Jewish communities.
At times there are times when there is no sunset, correct?
No, that's what I'm saying. In Anchorage, for example, there is always a sunset.
Okay.
Summer and winter. There is no nightfall in the summer, but there is always a sunset. Therefore, we are basically going by the real time. We go by sunset and sunrise, which means, in other words, that in June 21st, the longest day of the year, but when Shabbos begins, Shabbos ends, let's say Shabbos candle lighting, sunset will be around 11:40, and candle lighting will be 11:20. That's the latest day of the year. But because there is no nightfall, is the next day, on Saturday night, we cannot end Shabbos until we know for sure. So it's a Leisa Shachar, it's done for the next day, which means 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday morning.
So you end Shabbos at 2 o'clock in the morning in July, in June, these summer months?
In June, July, and August, in those 2.5 months.
Uh-huh.
Then in the middle of August, it starts to go down again.
And how do you do for fast days? Do you do similar like that for fast days, like Tisha B'Av?
Shavuos Tammuz and Tisha B'Av is our hardest days, because Tisha B'Av we have to fast usually till 12:30 at night, and Shavuos Tammuz we have to fast till 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's really, really hard. And I always tell tourists not to stay here for that day.
So you
my own children, I send them away for that day. Sometimes I send when I had a boy who was age of bar mitzvah, I would send him to Seattle for the day, for Tisha B'Av. He shouldn't have to fast so long.
Yeah, it's got to be a pretty hard fast to do that for more than the normal amount of time.
I mean, I got used to it, but it's not easy.
I can imagine it's got to be very complicated. So going back to your first year, you move out to, you're now in Anchorage, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so you move out to Anchorage, you unpack your bags, you have, I guess, your house over there. Now what? I mean, how does it develop out into, a Jewish center, into a Chabad activities? How do you get going over there?
Well, in my situation, it was much easier because I came to a group, the Havurah of families. It was much easier than other shluchim go in different places because of the 20 years relationship that there was before I came from 1970 to 1991. It's 21 years of a relationship between Chabad and those families who were here. That really created a base of families, especially the Green family, who were a real base for our relationship. Therefore, for us, it was easy. Like, we came 2 days before Purim. Actually, this Purim is going to celebrate 17 years. Next week, we'll celebrate 17 years from our shlichus. We came 2 days before Purim, and for Purim, there was a whole party in one of the houses waiting for me, a whole group of 70, 80 people waiting for me. For me, it was much easier. Mm-hmm. It wasn't easy, it was easier.
Tell us about your first Purim experience over there, and Purim's since then. I mean, I guess that's a good place to start for us.
Say it again.
Purim's, over the years, how have they been over there? I mean, what are your activities for Purim?
Oh, Purim. In the last 7-8 years, we have what is now common among shluchim. We have every year a different team. For example, this year we have Purim Hawaii at Aloha. And
so you have Purim Hawaii and Alaska.
Right. And because Alaska and Hawaii are really connected, there are a lot of people in Alaska who fly to Hawaii for vacation. Because, for whatever reason, because these two states are kind of outside of the United States and remote, yet Alaskans go especially to Hawaii. Many, many Alaskans, there is a non-stop flights all the time from Anchorage to Hawaii, because many go for vacation there during the winter.
So you have this year
this year our program is Purim Hawaii, and the food is going to be Hawaiian food, and the dress, all the children's dress up will be Hawaiian, and so on and on. And every year we do another team from another country. We have China, we have this and that, and it's very interesting because usually there is all kinds of things that come with it. Like, for example, we did one year Purim Japan. We had the ambassador from Japan here, and he spoke, and we had people from Japanese who came to perform. It kind of created an interesting environment and relationship, and you have opportunity to speak to the non-Jewish community about 7 night laws and so on and on.
Uh-huh. So now that you were there, you came in. So I mean, what activities have you set up over there? What activities are going on in Alaska, Jewish life?
Well, actually, I could tell you a big secret that within these days that we are talking, we are about to purchase a whole campus of Jewish life in Alaska of 3 buildings. One building will be the Jewish Museum, and the older building will be the Lubavitch Center and the preschool and the Sunday school and so on. And the third building will be for storage. And the 25,000 square foot buildings and the whole campus of 2.5 acres, which we are purchasing within those days. And
in the next few
it's
days
all based, of course. What?
In the next few days, you're purchasing this.
Right, and it's all based on the work for 17 years, preparing to get to this point.
Uh-huh. So, going on some of your activities over there, you have your own kids, and I'm sure there's a lot of kids in the community. I mean, what do you do with Jewish education over there?
Well, we have our institutions, our own mazes that we are running, and for example, we have we call it the an early age center, which means it's a preschool and a toddler program. Over 35 children who participate in that program. We have teachers, and it's a whole school that we are running, and we have teachers who come every year from Lubavitch, young graduates, seminar graduates who come to teach in our schools.
So you have a full-fledged school.
You have a
full-fledged school.
It's a preschool.
Oh, just a preschool.
It's a preschool and a toddler program. And then we have an after-school every day and a Sunday school for over 50 children that we, again, with the children of the location. Then we have, of course, the Camp Gan Israel, which is over 75 children. Some years we had winter camps and so on. There's a lot going on. And for our own children, we have young ladies who come to teach. In addition, now there is a new online school that my kids are really so in love with, what the Shluchim office is doing, which really has made a tremendous contribution to the life of Shluchim and to really change the life of Shluchim in the remote cities.
Online school
in an unbelievable way.
What is this? An online school? What is this online school? The Shluchim office, the Chabad Lubavitch headquarters have put together some type of system so kids can go to get their regular education that they would normally get on an online program. How does this work?
Well, it's a very interesting. You have in this in the Chabad Lubavitch Spiritual Resource Center of the Shluchim office. You have a whole program with a principal and teachers, and they have a webcam that the children could see the teachers and the children could see each other, and it's set up in a way that when the children go on the web, they open up the first page that comes up, they see how they walk into the Shluchim.
We're back with Rabbi Greenberg on the line. Rabbi Greenberg, so you were telling us about the online school that the kids can see each other in the classroom. Your kids go on to this internet program. They see each other from other, I guess, countries and far out places where they're looking at other kids who are in similar circumstances as them. They're not in a place where there's other religious Jewish kids, and they're getting their religious Jewish education online. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct. Basically, it's other schools. I mean, that's all cities where there is no Jewish day schools. And we talk about many, many towns in America, Canada, Russia, everywhere where there is no schools. And the difference in the hours is amazing. Some of the kids getting their school is during the evening and afternoon hours. So some of my children, it's in the morning hours. My son, who is now almost bar mitzvah, he wakes up at 6 o'clock in the morning, because 7 o'clock starts his online school. From 7 in the morning till 12, 5 hours, he has a whole school online. And it's a real school. They're learning real stuff. It's not, they have classes, and they have a principal. Just the other day, a principal called them to test them.
Uh-huh.
And they have principal, and they have tests, and they get emails every day. They have to print them out. They have to be on time. They can't talk during the class, because the teacher could see them and could hear them, and the teacher could text mute them, and I mean, it's just amazing what's going on, and they get turns to speak on the speaker and so on. And now, as I said before, they're making a whole Purim play online without webcams. Every child is going to have their part on the Purim play. And on the web, they're going to have different games which related to that play, which is amazing to see how they managed to, as accomplished, to create this whole world online, which really helps so many Shluchim families that years ago they would have no choice. I mean, as a child used to reach the age of 10, you had to send them at least for a month here, a month there to a cheder, because the kid would go crazy. It was an age that he needs to have some kind of friendship, some kind of learning, I mean, the father who is a shliach, there's no way a father could take away all day from his work and teach his child. And if he would do it, he would know to do his work. I mean, he can do it both. But now, with the online school, it's amazing. The kids could be at home at a later age and still get all the benefit, and the kids, they talk to each other on the phone right after school, and they text messaging each other, and they even speak on the webcam to each other even after school is over. They have chavrusas that they call each other and they learn together. It's just unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And then they see each other once a year when they come, or twice a year when they come for Gimel Tammuz or for Shchedesh Kislev, for Kislev Shluchim. They see each other, and then they also meet each other in camps when they go to Detroit or to other camps, to Gan Yisrael, New York. is those kids really see each other and they really know each other. It's not just like they really become real good friends, and then when they choose a yeshiva, they want to go together and so on and on.
Mm-hmm. So kids make friendships through going to this school online, and this is what your kids have done. They've gone to this program online where they get their education.
Yeah, that's probably the first and the only Jewish online school in the world, and even I would say it might be the first online school for children, period. Because even, I mean, there are for adults online schools, like, for college age, but children to learn online, it's so unusual because in most, even remote communities, you have a little school. The public school, a non-Jewish public school for all the kids, so like even a village has 500 people, 300 people, they have a school. And it's probably the only online school for children that age. And I have Jewish professors from the university here who are trying to create an online school for the native communities, the native villages, and they're amazed that little children that young could relate and be able to actually learn and not get confused and so on from online school.
Mm-hmm. So, continuing back to Jewish life in Alaska, kosher food. How do you deal with kosher food? If somebody wants to keep kosher, I mean, you and your family are keeping strictly kosher, not only strictly kosher as Chabad, you're keeping with milk, you're keeping Chol Yisrael, you only have Chol Yisrael products. So how do you work out having such a high level of kosher standards living in Alaska?
Well, because it's America, thank God, the only problem that we have is it's expensive. But, we get air cargo, we pay maybe $1 a pound for everything that we eat. We get shipments every once in 6 weeks. But of course, because of that, because of being dependent on that, it could happen 2 days before Pesach, and you ordered something, and the planes are totally full, and you can't put even a box on the plane, and you get stuck and you don't know what to do. I mean, because, it's not the same when you have a store. But in overall, we get shipments once in 6 weeks from everything, from holiday fall, as you said, from bread to milk, everything, from meat. But in the last 4 years, we have a local store, which is a natural pantry store, and they have started to bring in a lot of kosher food. And there is a market. Even though it's not necessarily exactly on our level, but a lot of items we could buy there, and when we got stuck with something, we could always run there and buy. Even though we still continue our shipments, our monthly shipments, but still it's good to have a local place where there is a lot, that even my children got crazy when they see that they sell chocolate milk, milk chocolate right here in Anchorage. And they can't believe it after so many years that we couldn't see anything on the level that we could eat, anything but that.
You're telling me they're selling Chol Yisrael chocolate in Anchorage, Alaska?
Yep, that's a new world. And it's funny that after this one store began to carry the kosher food, year after year, day after day, all of a sudden all the big chains are starting to carry kosher food. Because now they realize there is a market. Now all of a sudden they're all carrying it. So, Fred Meyer's and Cars and all the big chains, you could walk in and find a lot of kosher items.
So do you have other, are there other families in Alaska that are keeping kosher?
Oh yeah, of course. We have a whole group of families for keeping kosher, and therefore, we are connected to over 250 families who are part of our center and synagogue and museum. And many of them are families on different levels of kosher. Many of them are Shomer Shabbos. And there is a market for kosher food.
So, what other Jewish activities you're purchasing a building? You have education for after school programs for kids, summer camps. You have classes over there, I would assume. Absolutely,
we used to have. I still have. When Barnes and Noble opened up here, they asked me to come and give lectures, and I give courses of lectures. We call it the Alaska Jewish Institute of Education, and I don't know if the famous JLI, that if you heard of them, their name kind of came. We were first with that name of a Jewish Learning Institute here in Alaska, and we had started when we started to give lectures in Barnes and Noble on different topics, and really it made a major effect we would have 50, 60 people, and we're still giving now different lectures in different areas based from those years. But there is a lot of activities going on. We have a lot of lectures happening. We have a lot of scholars who come here. Alaska is a place in the summer where people come touring, and we had during the years many, many famous scholars like Norman Lamb from Yeshiva University. We had Ibn Tversky. We had different scholars and famous politicians who came here and spoke for the Jewish community and for the non-Jewish community, made a big Kiddush Hashem. And we have really a lot going on here. Like just the last summer, we had the famous author Michael Shaban, who wrote the book Yiddish Policeman Union, which talks about fiction, about Alaska being the place where all the Jews go there before the Holocaust instead of going to Israel and so on. And it's based on a real story when Jews from Germany were trying to go to Alaska in a way to escape the Holocaust, and there were senators behind it and so on, and they died in subcommittee.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can tell us. Maybe you can.
We have a lot of things going on.
Maybe you can tell us. If you can tell us some stories of some of your experiences in Alaska, some things that come to mind that you would have.
Yeah, just 1 second. Just give me 2 more minutes. I'll finish the story.
That's okay. I'm going to go to Mara's real quick. Do you have a to-do up here, honey?
Yeah, downstairs. Sure. Hello?
Sounds like you have a class going in the background.
Well, I have people here. I have one. The lay leader of the Jewish community in Ketchikan is here with me to visit this Shabbos.
Uh-huh.
Ketchikan, Alaska is very far from here. It's like 2.5 hours flying or more. It's closer to Seattle than to Anchorage. That's how big Alaska is.
So anyways, maybe you can tell us some stories of your experiences in Alaska. And
let me share with you one story which I think will be meaningful to the listeners. This story is about the second year that we came to Alaska. The second year or the third year? It was I think either the second or the third year that we had a Hanukkah celebration. We did it in one of the central places of Anchorage. And a family came to the Hanukkah celebration. We didn't know them. And we realized that they were very interested in what's going on. And we actually, we spoke to them and so on. And then we haven't heard from them for a few months. Just 1 second. Hello?
Yeah.
Maybe I should try. I'll start again. I'll just finish with that story because I really must go. Okay?
So just a few more minutes.
Yes, let me start again the story, and I will finish with this. It was the second year we came to Alaska. We had a Hanukkah celebration at one of the centers in downtown in Anchorage, and a Jewish family who came with their 2 children. We had no idea who they are. We saw that they just came out from the street. Of course, we were nice to them. We spoke to them, and we haven't heard from them. Then, maybe a few months later in the summer, we got a call from the mother, and she's asking us if she heard we are going to have a day camp, if their children could go to our day camp. I said, sure. They came to camp. After 2 weeks in camp, she comes over and she said that she had a special request, that although her son is almost bar mitzvah, and he didn't get any formal Jewish education, but because the grandmother is insisting that she make a bar mitzvah, she's asking me if I'll agree to make a bar mitzvah for them. I said, fine, I'll make a bar mitzvah for you. Anyway, the grandmother flew in from California and made a bar mitzvah here. And in the middle of the bar mitzvah, she stood up and she said that she would like to say a few words. She was already old, she was in her 80s. And she said it's really meaningful to her that her grandson made a bar mitzvah. She realized that he started his education very late and he couldn't do much. He barely did the blessing for the Aliyah and so on. But she's so glad that there was a contact. And the reason for this, she said, because her family are descendants of a very, very famous tzaddik, maybe you heard of him. His name was Rabbi Baal Shem Tov. And it was interesting to listen. She said she was born in Berditchev, and she, her family was from, and the teachers would come even to teach the grove until the age of 12 to the revolution, and then her father went to the war and never came back. And that's basically how the family went away from Yiddishkeit. But just one second. I'll call right back in 2 minutes. And after that, they started a relationship with us, and that son went to Ivy League over Rabbi Hecht in Adar Torah, and he came back, and he became really involved in Yiddishkeit, and he's now in Tampa, Florida. He goes to Chabad house, and he's involved in Yiddishkeit there. And the younger daughter, became involved with our system, and then she went to college. She became kosher. She called me from college and said, "Now I have my own house. I want to be kosher," and she kosher the kitchen. As you see, you never know, the concept of a Hanukkah celebration in the street, and you're lighting a Hanukkah candle and so on, and the fact that it has an amazing way. I must conclude now. Maybe if you want, we could continue another time.
I do appreciate Rabbi Greenberg for coming on and telling us about the Jewish life in Alaska, and we really appreciate it. We wish you well and much success with your new Jewish center that you're recently purchasing, and we wish you a very, very happy and joyful Purim to you and all the Jews out there in Alaska.